So, without further ado, we have 3 panelists here tonight. I'm going to let each one introduce them because I failed to ask them for a bio before the meeting. So I'll let them take care of that. We will just move right to left across the panel. And if you could introduce yourself and go ahead and give your portion of the presentation, whatever it is that you want to talk about 15, 20 minutes, I think would be great. If you have more or less, no problem. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers, if that's okay with everybody.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
All right, I should have sat over there so I could My name is Conrado Saldivar. I am past president of the Wyoming Library Association. Just moved into this position after a year and a half of being in the presidency role. I'm kind of here more so, I guess, background. I started in libraries in 2015 at the Natrona County Library in Casper at the main branch. Started in adult services, took a little bit of a sabbatical and worked at the state library down in Cheyenne for about a year and a half. And then earlier this year, went back to the Natrona County Library to take a management position for two of the departments up there. So I guess start my portion, or is my, okay? Yeah, so I do just want to clarify that the Wyoming Library Association is not the Wyoming State Library. In talking about book challenges and censorship and limiting access to library materials, we kind of get messed up a little bit. The Wyoming State Library is its own physical building with its own staff, a state librarian down in Cheyenne. They have statutorily mandated requirements that they have to perform. They receive federal funds, they receive state funds. The Wyoming Library Association, my organization, we are entirely a private membership organization. We're a 501c6. Our board is a 10-person board, nine of which are voting positions. We are all volunteers, we all have day jobs, and then do this when we have time, as we have time. Sometimes late into the night if you're preparing to go testify in front of the legislature 3 days in a row. But so just to clarify that, it's easy to get us confused because the state library used to be called the Wyoming State Library Association way back when. But that's not the case anymore. And I apologize for the coughing. I had a cold last week and I'm still kind of recovering from all of that nonsense. So the Wyoming Library Association was formed October 6th in 1914. One of the primary objective was to promote the library interest in the state of Wyoming. On that day, at least 25 members were present and signed WLA's first constitution. So over a century of library work and librarians working to promote library services throughout the state. That objective is still found in our mission today. A little bit of a variation where we now look to promote Wyoming library interests at the local, statewide, and national levels. We do try to make sure that people don't forget about Little Wyoming when we look at larger organizations like the American Library Association. We do have a chapter membership with the American Library Association. We pay a chapter membership fee, but we also have an ALA counselor position on our board. She not only votes out on board, but she also gets to attend all of the ALA meetings and vote on behalf of Wyoming. And when I tell you that she is vocal, she will not hold back in those meetings. It's about 160 counselors who attend those meetings and vote. And Lisa Scroggins, she's the executive director at the Natrona County Library. She makes sure Wyoming's voice is heard when she attends those. You may have heard some of the rhetoric disassociating from the American Library Association. We've been approached, I think, in confusion because people think we're the state library. But we are going to continue renewing our state chapter membership because we don't want to lose our voice at that national level. We're not going to take our ball and go home because we're not happy with the American Library Association 100% of the time. Just a broad overview about the Wyoming Libraries community. There are 23 county library systems. The commissioners in each county are required to fund a public library and to hire a competent library director, competent being coming from the statute, to hire a competent library director to run the county library system. Those 23 counties make up 77 service points, either buildings or the 3 bookmobiles in Wyoming. We have 8 community college libraries. The university library system, which is its own mass of different specialized libraries. Libraries in all of the 48 school districts in Wyoming, and various special libraries. And at any given time, there's approximately 1,000 library workers in Wyoming. WLA, we have about 240 members right now. So when you look at percentages, that's a pretty strong, healthy percentage of library workers who are also members of the Wyoming Library Association. So to talk about free access to information. So the first public library in the United States was created in 1790 by Benjamin Franklin. It's in Franklin, Massachusetts. And that was essentially created because that town wanted him to donate something to the town. They asked for a bell, and he said sense was more important than sound, so he donated books instead. The residents then voted for the books to be freely available for town members. And then after that, libraries following the board governed, like is the case in Wyoming, and tax-funded model started spreading to other parts following the Civil War. So that concept of free access to taxpayer-supported libraries has been around for a very long time. And from there, we've kind of seen this influx of, or this, I guess, little increase and decrease of censorship attempts throughout time. 1920s, an easy example that isn't political, I guess is a good way to put it, is there was a large push to remove barnyard fiction from libraries because it was not intellectually stimulating and had no benefit to the public. Barnyard fiction, you can think New York bestsellers, James Patterson, C.J. Box, Craig Johnson. They would be considered barnyard fiction and not worthy of being on library shelves in the 1920s. 1940s, of course, we saw some more pushes to remove books from the libraries. During McCarthyism, we saw more books to remove, more challenges to remove books from library materials from libraries. Starting in 2021, June 2021 in Campbell County, that's where we really saw the current attempt to remove access to library materials. And what ignited that was a social media post from the Campbell County Public Library. They posted on Facebook just a link to its Rainbow Book Month. Here are some books around Pride Month that you should check out, and kind of just spiraled into nonsense, I would say. It's just a really highly politicized and unhealthy environment for library staff and people who use the library and want others to have free access to the library. So as many of you know, Terry Leslie was fired from her position on July 28th. It's kind of a culminating experience, or the culminating point of everything from June 2021. Public libraries are not kind of in their own little silos. School libraries have also been affected. The Natrona County School District was kind of one of the first ones where they were seeing attempts to remove particularly two books that are now used as examples of why certain material shouldn't be in libraries. Those two books are Genderqueer and Trans Bodies, Trans Selves. Those were kind of the Natrona County issue. Laramie County School District number 1, those who want to remove books from that school district have targeted 112 books via their social media or their Facebook page. For one reason or another, maybe they were too violent, maybe they contain images of nudity, maybe they used words to describe sex. But of those 112 books in Laramie County School District number 1, 42 featured LGBTQ plus characters, stories, or authors, and 35 featured minority characters, stories, or authors. Some of those are kind of in the middle, so you can't group those two together. And of those 112 books, 10 of those weren't even in the school district, but they still had an issue in one of them out of the school district. So that's kind of the issue we're facing, just with looking at the larger ecosystem, is this perspective that all libraries have all of these books that we have an issue with, which is definitely not the case. Like I mentioned, the 23 county library systems and the community colleges, we all share one library database. So you can go on to Tracy's catalog and see all of the books that are available in Wyoming, in a couple of schools as well. You can even request books from there, even if Tracy's library doesn't have it. So that causes a little bit of confusion. We also, leading up to the legislative session, Representative Jeanette Ward proposed House Bill 87 based off of her experience in Natrona County School District and going to speak to the Natrona County School District to remove certain books from the school library collections. That House Bill 87 would essentially remove the obscenity exemption. So as it stands in statute, let me pull it up. So the wording is, so it's under the promoting obscenities portion of Wyoming statute. So if you promote obscenity, there's all these things that can happen to you. But you are exempt if you produce, reproduce, possess, or disseminate, which libraries disseminate information. We provide access to information. Except if you disseminate in the course of bona fide school, college, university, museum, or public library activities, or in the course of employment of such an organization. One of the concepts that came out from House Bill 87 in a comment from Representative Tommy Strzok was that if we remove the exemption, like school librarians in general will be more cautious about what they're ordering for the library collections. That is essentially a form of censorship. Censorship is saying, well, if we make sure that they have a little bit of fear that they can be prosecuted with a misdemeanor, they can be fined up to $1,000, up to $6,000 if it's to a minor, that they'll take a little step back and say, maybe that book isn't appropriate for our library shelves. So that was an interesting concept there. We also testified, so that was on a Thursday. On the Wednesday before that, we testified against Senate File 177, which was the Senate version. This was brought on by Senator Sherry Steinmetz. She filed pretty much the exact same bill without having talked to Representative Ward, but essentially to remove that exemption. And one of the questions she had, which at the time I didn't quite have an answer for, is she really was trying to push that parental rights. Why aren't parents included in this? And our defense was saying, well, our librarians are providing this material. We have to provide resources for every member in our communities that we serve. I think now, looking back, that's a great question. Why aren't parents kind of excluded from this exemption? And I'm sure there are some really great conversations in there about, all of the abuse and child abuse situations in Wyoming, but ultimately that bill was pulled. Senate File 177 was pulled because it wasn't ready for prime time. There were too many questions. No one went and testified in defense of the bill. It was all members testifying against the bill. Again, Thursday we testified against House Bill 87. That bill died in committee. It didn't even make it out of committee. The vote was 3-6. 3 ayes, yes, we should proceed, 6 nays. And then we also testified the following Friday against House Bill 283. This one was a little bit different approach for libraries because it was trying to shift how you define obscenity away from the Miller test that is within our statutes, where it has to appeal to the prurient interest. The average person has to, there's 3 points in there, they're on the phone, but I won't bore you with all of that stuff. But essentially saying, yeah, that's great, but it's really going to come back to community standards. And the community standards are what defines obscenity in this case, which leaving in the Miller test, the 3 points of the Miller test in statute, kind of drew a lot of conflict. Who defines it, and then also the community standards as listed previously in those statutes also use the word contemporary, which is a key point, contemporary community standards. And in his version, contemporary was not included. So that one didn't even receive a second in the committee. Someone moved, I believe it was Representative Andrews moved, and no one seconded. So also dining committee there. So those are some of the things that the Library Association was facing and has seen across the state. Various censorship attempts, not only in Laramie County, but also in Natrona County, Park County, School District number 6, had a lot of challenges against books like The Color Purple by Alice Walker. It's here and there, pretty, you're in a lull and then suddenly you have a lot of people show up to public meetings, which of course, yes, we want to hear community voices at public meetings. But sometimes they're heightened, emotionally heightened, and a lot of derogatory terms are used to refer to library staff, which is something from a library association perspective, that's not what we want to see. We want to be there to support our library workers in this regard. A great example is from my library, the Natrona County Library. We recently had a request for reconsideration for a book called Puppy Pride. It's a picture book, it's an alphabet book. Each page walks you through A is for, B is for, C is for, helping kids learn their alphabet. Basically, the allegation was that we were indoctrinating children by having that book available to the community. Our viewpoint was that that book made up a very small percentage of not only the alphabet books, but also of the LGBTQ books in the collection compared to our larger 200,000 item collection. We'll see where that one goes, but a lot of this, again, has been targeted towards the LGBTQ community. I think one example that really sticks out, especially as some individuals try to shape this as it's not LGBTQ, it's sexually explicit material, is the book. It's a children's book called Mary Wears What She Wants. This was challenged in Campbell County, and the rationale for that challenge was that it promoted cross-dressing. Mary, the book is about a Civil War doctor who wore pants because she was on the battlefield tending to wounded soldiers. And wearing pants allowed her to move more quickly to tend to more wounded soldiers. So I think that's kind of what the Library Association is focused on. The current narrative around censorship in books, yes, is about sexually explicit content in libraries. Superintendent Dagenfelder is going to testify at Capitol Hill tomorrow about sexually explicit material on school shelves. That's at 8:15 in the morning tomorrow. So yeah, I think it's important to not only look forward to see and kind of work through from here onward, but also we have to go back to June 2021 and evaluate why all of these book challenges started in the first place, which was LGBTQ content, not only in Campbell County, but also in a lot of other places in Wyoming. I did provide a handout at the back, Censorship by the Numbers. This is a handout from the American Library Association. Feel free to take a look at it. They normally do a list of top 10 challenged books in America. They did 13 this year because they had so many and there were ties. So there were 13 books at the top of that list. I'm pretty sure you can find those in at least one public library in Wyoming if you wanted to take a look and see why they were being challenged. So this is the 2022 data. They issued a preliminary report just 2 weeks ago during Banned Books Week, October 1st through the 7th, giving an update for January through August of this year. And compared to January and August of last year, this year's numbers show a 20% increase in the number of materials that have been challenged in libraries. They also noticed that more challenges are taking place in public libraries. They were pretty neck and neck for quite a while, but there's been a lot of changes in school policies and a lot of, like, for example, in Natrona County, 11 books are now opt-in where parents have to say, yes, my child can have access to these 11 books that are behind the librarian's desk. So a lot of one potential explanation is that they're seeing that they're making progress in the school, so now they're shifting their focus to public libraries. That is something that we saw during our testimony down in Cheyenne. It started off not in my schools, and then it went to, well, not with my taxpayer funds. And so that's where Representative Ward said, not in schools, not in public libraries, not with taxpayer funds. We should not be providing these obscene materials, even though no book has been ruled obscene in Wyoming, based off of the definitions and statutes. Not my taxpayer funds to support things that I don't agree with, which again is a form of censorship. Just making sure that you can't use these partisan viewpoints to limit access to materials when libraries are there to promote free access to all members of the community. And with that, I think I went over my time, so I'll stop talking.
Well, that was very informative, first of all, so thank you very much. And mine's going to be shorter, so I'm going to give you some of my time. But my name is Sherman Skelton. I'm on the school board. I was born and raised in Demopolis, so it's a community that I really care about, that I'm passionate about, and I feel that serving on the school board is one of the greatest ways to serve my community. I have 3 kids in the school district now. One is in 6th grade, 3rd grade, and pre-K. So I feel like, I'm a school board member, but first of all, I'm a community member and a parent. So those are my motivations. So what I'm going to talk about specifically are the policies, procedures that we have on the school side, and those certainly are going to differ from responsibilities and roles that the public library serves. I do deeply appreciate the opportunity to have a forum like this because I think it's incredibly important to hear what is relevant in our community. It wasn't too long ago. It's interesting to hear the references to Natrona County. My wife gives me a hard time because I oftentimes watch board meetings from around the state. I feel like that's one of the greatest ways to learn what other boards are dealing with, how they deal with it, those procedures. So I watch, Natrona County has a lot of videotaped and broadcast board meetings. And they, in their last election, they had 2 board members that were elected that are members of Moms for Liberty, and that group was here about a month ago. What frustrated me with that when they have that discussion is they don't ask board members from here to talk about what's going on here. They bring board members from Natrona County to talk about how their curriculum is being dictated from the state instead of really getting the facts of what that looks like here. So I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about what is relevant and what we have going on here. I do apologize because I am not a polished speaker that you just heard, so I do have some written and prepared words. But so I do want to say also, I in no way will claim that I know all of our policies. We try to review each policy over a 3-year period, so it takes us about 3 years to go through all our policies, so there's a lot of them. But I'm going to just focus on a few of them that are relevant to what books are in our library and how we, I say we, the board is not really involved in that process, but how the professionals in the classrooms, the professionals in the administration, how those people come to the decision on what books are going to be in the school library. So all of these policies are public information. They're on the district webpage, and we also have a school district app on your phone that you can access all this information on. Libraries and books within them have certainly been a flashpoint over the last few years. The school libraries have certainly not been immune from receiving their share of vitriol. The reason these panels are beneficial is because it allows that dialogue. And I think sometimes when you don't have dialogue, you have monologues, and that doesn't lead to, that's not solution oriented. And if I'm going to have a discussion, I like to approach it with, from the avenue of sharing ideas, finding the best approach, and moving forward from there. I certainly don't have all the answers. And like I said, I have 3 kids, so I'm reminded of that on a daily basis. So some of the policies we have a policy for a citizen's request for reconsideration of a book or other material that is used as part of the curriculum. And you heard that there have been some instances where there's been those policies used other places. It's never been used here as far as I know. We have a policy that outlines the procedure in which a patron can challenge instructional interlibrary books. This was something that came up in the last election. You know, I heard some narratives about, well, why do we have these spicy books or racy books or explicit books? And I brought this policy to a forum once and I said, you know, here's our policy. There's never been one that had been filled out prior to that point. Many people didn't even know we had it. That's why this is important. People have questions. They don't know that we already have policies that cover those situations. And we also have a policy that outlines what criteria a library book should meet. And I was going to read some of that criteria real quick. The board believes that the responsibility of the school library is to provide materials that will enrich and support the curriculum, taking into consideration the varied interests, abilities, and maturity levels of the pupils served. To provide materials that will stimulate growth in factual knowledge, literary appreciation, aesthetic values, and ethical standards. To provide a background or information which will enable pupils to make intelligent judgments in their daily life. To provide materials on opposing sides of controversial issues so that young citizens may develop, under guidance, the practice of critical reading and thinking. To provide materials representative of the many religious, ethnic, and cultural groups and the contributions to our American heritage, and to place principle above personal opinion and reason above prejudice in the selection of materials of the highest quality in order to assure a comprehensive collection appropriate for the users of the library. To be honest, I hadn't read that policy until a couple days ago when we talked about this, but you know, as a parent, those are all the things that I value. I want my kids to be exposed to other cultures, religions, ethnic groups, and to be challenged in their critical thinking. That's something I've heard over the last few years is, why don't we teach kids critical thinking anymore? And I would challenge that kids are being taught that, but we're losing that as adults. We heard a bit about, you know, I've watched the education committee meetings and through the legislature. I think that's one of the great things too, that those are televised. And one of the catchphrases now is parental rights in education, which I found that very frustrating because I feel like we've always had that. A parent is only limited in their child's education by how willing they are to be engaged. But so I also think I've wanted to ask, and I've asked a few people, when I hear parental rights in education, I wonder about parental responsibilities in education. I know, you know, here there are many avenues. We also hear about school choice. We have school choice in Wyoming. You know, you have multiple avenues in which you can choose to educate your child. But I do know students personally who are being, who their parents are failing them in their education. So those parents who have rights in that education of that child, but they also have responsibilities in the education of that child. So one thing that Hot Springs County School District Number 1 has is we have what's called a District Guiding Coalition. This coalition is made up of teacher representatives from each building, a rep from the tech department, administration, parent representatives for each building, and school board representatives. This coalition meets on a monthly basis through the school year. It is, in the last few years I've been a part of that. It truly is the greatest way you can see all the work that goes into building curriculum and the inner workings of your school district. But in that process of the Guiding Coalition, they have come up with a system to set guidelines of age appropriateness for books. So I have those because I don't have them in memory. Somewhere here. But for example, like at the elementary school, any book that is rated 9 years and above, they don't have in the RWE library. 13 and above, they don't have it in the middle school, and 18 and above, they don't have it in the high school. And those ratings are based off of, there's some sites, one is called Book Nanny. Amazon, when they place the book orders, also has age ratings. Now, the difficulty with that is, what do you do with a student that is a very proficient reader? How do you challenge them sufficiently? So then that's where you have to have that discussion with parents, and they can opt into some additional challenging reading materials. So those, that's a discussion. This last year, I think it probably happened in around March or April. What happens is the teacher groups in those buildings come up with a list of books that they want to order to enhance the educational opportunities for their students. And then that guiding coalition reviews those books, and they have those discussions about, well, how this will fit into the curriculum, what's appropriate, what may not be appropriate, and then those things are ordered from there. So sometimes I think there's a desire to give this impression that, and I've heard it, somebody locally had posted, a statement from the Wyoming Freedom Alliance that the American Library Association and the American Association of School Libraries, that they dictate or basically direct what books are on the library shelves in the schools. That unequivocally does not happen here. Now, I'm not saying that maybe they don't get feedback or recommendations, but I called our librarians today and said, have you ever had some directive come from somebody? They never have had anybody tell them what they need to order or give that direction. So, like I said, reiterate, that's why I think it's important to have relevant discussions on what things are happening here versus maybe other places. With that, I guess, I just want to find my spot again. I do want to say, I look forward to the question and answer part of this, because I also want to throw out there, again, my name is Sherman Skelton. My phone number is 899-3887. If you have somebody, or you approach them in the community, and they approach you, and you're going to hear some of this, some of these narratives in the coming years. The two new school board members that were on the Trona County VAC group has a definite interest in changing the face of what things look like here. So, we have, I feel like, a responsibility to, not to try to change minds, but just try to give information, factual information, and then, obviously, people choose from there. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Sherman. So, my name is Tracy Kinnaman, and I'm currently the library director here at Hot Springs County Library. A little bit of background is I volunteered in 1996 when my kids were little to do story time, story hour, and I did that for about 3 years. At that time, the children's librarian position came open, and I was the children's librarian for 13 years. Then the library director position came open, and I applied and was hired for that. I've been library director now for 12, 13 years. So I come from a long line of educators. My mother was an educator for 35 years. I think she even taught this guy.
She was the principal, and
Oh,
I
the
was in
principal.
her office a few times.
So, anyway, yeah, so, and my sister was an educator. I have many cousins, aunts, and uncles that were educators. On the other hand, I think I have the funnest job. I don't have to put up with this. I don't have a whole lot of policies I have to follow. We do have policies that are in place. They're very old. I don't know near as much about what he knows, because he's been on the front lines. And I can say, in the whole time that I've worked for Hot Springs County Library, I've never been challenged on a book. I did have a parent come to me, for example, this is many years ago when I was the children's librarian. Her son had checked out a book on anorexia. Okay. It was probably more of a tween, maybe geared at 12 or 13 years old. He might have been a little bit younger than that. And she had asked him, my son checked this out. He said it was in the children's section. My son is struggling with this. And your complaint? She didn't think that it was appropriate for her son or that it was encouraging this behavior. I told the parent, first of all, it's not my decision whether it's right or wrong to let your child check this book out. You needed to be here along with him if that's what you decide. If you're gonna, what am I trying to say? If you're gonna debate what your children checks out, then you should take an active role. So that was a long time ago, and I really have never been challenged before. Like I said, I do have the kind of the fun job because I don't have the such strict policies that you have to go through and your librarians go through. My policy is basically just the community. What does the community want? My community wants James Patterson. My community wants the next Daniel Steele. So I think that I'm lucky as being a director of this community and a community that I grew up in. I know what people want to read. I see what my community wants to see. Do I have books that are being challenged? I do, because generally it's, hey, it's challenged. You tell me no, I say go, and I will order that book. Because I don't really have anybody tell me not to. Now the whole taxpayer money thing is kind of interesting. You know, everybody pays taxes. LGBTQ people pay taxes. So if you're the one that says, my taxpayer money isn't going to go for that literature, well then just consider that I have the brand new 2023 gun book, or what, you know what I'm saying, is think if your money is buying those things and not the LGBTQ. So, I can tell you the history of Hot Springs County Library and that it became a Carnegie Library in, let me see, what do I have? 1919, okay? We started the library here in 1901, and it's a great process of how they become where we are today. As you can see, we have the Intellectual Freedom Manual. Our trusty Dustin one of these. So, I just want to read this, and this is actually what I feel as a librarian, and I will repeat it to anyone. Intellectual freedom encompasses the freedom to hold, receive, and disseminate ideas without restriction. I don't know what else you can say. That's what it is. You have ideas, I have ideas. Just because I don't agree doesn't make them wrong. So, I challenge any questions. That's what I'd like. I really would like for anyone to just ask me a question. Like, not talking. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Tracy said something that sparked something that I wanted to say as well, is about the parental engagement. Is one thing that the school does too is when your child does check out a book, you immediately get, or I shouldn't say immediately, very shortly will get an email, hey, your child checked out this book, here's the title, this is the due date, and so I've gotten numerous of those with my elementary and middle school age child, and they each have fines too, so it does show you fines, because I've never been alerted to that. So
That's amazing, yeah.
Well, so I mean, you know, when you said that, it sparked that too. That was something I wanted to mention, that, again, it goes along with, you're going to be alerted. It's now your responsibility as the parent then to, have that discussion, and oftentimes the hope is that maybe that would spark a discussion with that, maybe that child that is struggling with something that maybe they haven't been able to broach that with their parent, but now you can have that.
Is that an opt-in, opt-out type of thing?
Well,
Is that for everybody?
That's for every student. They'll get that email, and then at that point, yes, if the parent wanted to opt that student out of that book, or to alert the librarian, hey,
Yeah.
please don't let, Johnny check these books out anymore or something, then you have that discussion. Again, that's where that dialogue has.
See, that tells me right there that we do, I mean, with all of the electronic and media and all of that we have today, there's no excuse for a parent to not be engaged and to not take responsibility. That's amazing, that they know immediately, so they have that time to confront it.
I paid Tracy to say that's amazing.
Never heard of that.
And with that, that's what we prefer to see around Wyoming, is having that initial conversation about that book on anorexia, about whatever topic you may see come through your emails, is we encourage parents to go talk to the actual librarians first. Have that conversation, find out what tools are available in the school district, in the public library district systems, before anyone shows up to a board meeting. Regardless of where you stand politically, across the board, there have been multiple studies in the past 2 years that show that people are not okay with censorship. They want to ensure that people have access to information. They want to have those open conversations that are vital to our democracy. Like the emails, so the new catalog that the public libraries are on, parents can link their children's cards to their card. It's in the settings, if we log on, go to settings, you can link children's cards on there. Children cannot unlink their cards unless they know their parent's PIN. So again, it's not necessarily parental rights, it's parental responsibility. Unfortunately, former board chair from Campbell County says that's too much for parents to do. Fully disagree with that. During testimony against House Bill 283, the executive director from the Laramie County Library System was asked a question about, do you monitor what books children are looking at on the shelves? And I don't know, well, I do know this. Libraries are not staffed where they should be. So Tracy cannot be monitoring every single child that is in her library if she's the only person there, if she's helping someone on the computers. To be able to monitor what everyone is looking at on the library is too much to ask for a government employee. We cannot be censoring, as government employees, what people are looking at on the shelves. So making sure that parents have that conversation first, and then understand all of the tools that are available to them to hopefully guide their children and read alongside their children when they're in the libraries.
I think a good librarian also knows their patrons. And I've had, for instance, one particular young man had wanted true crime. I think he was probably 13. My youngest son loved true crime. I understand it, I get it. But I could tell that it was going to be over his head. He wasn't going to get through the book. Not that it was over his head, it's just that he wasn't at that level at 13 to read true crime. I said, I have the book for you, Holes. And if any of you have seen the movie or read the book Holes, it's about a young man that actually goes to reform school, and he read it, and he loved it. But that book was here. It was at his level. So a good librarian wouldn't have let him check out a true crime book, because you know your patron is not there. So that's where I feel lucky, because I live in a small enough community where I know my patrons, I know my kids that come in, and I know most of the parents as well, and I know that if any of the parents ever have a question that they could come to me. and we can talk about this, or we can shift them to another author, another, you know, because kids are picky. They wanna read those big books. They, you know, and those heavy subjects. But really, they don't. You know, because, you know, you've had, and I know being the mother of boys, they'll want, oh, but they just know that it's just not, they're not there yet. So.
Well, some of what I hear in that too is that I've always said we are blessed to live in Thermopolis and where we live, and I've always said it takes a village to raise a child, and so what Tracy's talking about is knowing. She knows her patrons, but she also knows those kids and what's best for them. She knows their parents, and so it does take a village, and I think we are blessed to have that. That's I think valuable.
Yeah, and we're lucky to have you.
Okay, you ready for question and answer?
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna start. So last night, Secretary Gray was here in town discussing a myriad of issues. And one of the things that he said repeatedly was that we have porn in our schools. Could you please address that?
Absolutely. So I would say, I did watch some of that online. What I always find interesting, and this is, I guess, why I gave my name and phone number. It's easy to say we have things and hard to prove that we have things. And that's some of what I guess has always frustrated me in the last several years especially, is that we hear these things, we have examples cited. If I had heard one more time that we have litter boxes in schools, I was going to just, I said I will volunteer, I will drive you to wherever you say they are, and we will go see that. There is no more intensely regulated from a health and safety standpoint any facility in the entire country than a school building. And so the idea that would happen was incredible to me, but the people that would talk to you were adamant that that is happening, but nobody had proof. It was easy to say, and it elicits this response that is, aggressive and, the response that they want to elicit, but nobody had proof. So, do we have porn in our schools? Absolutely. Every school in this country has porn in it, and it's in the pocket of every student. Those kids have available to them basically a computer with unlimited access. Yep. So I will tell you, the first nude form that my child saw, probably when he was about 7 years old, was from a picture that his cousin had shown him off his phone. Much older cousin. Parents were alerted. Nothing was really done. But I mean, that child did not come across that in the school library. Didn't come across it in the public library. So I think that those are very misplaced and I think dangerous statements because, like I said, the book on that library shelf is probably the least of the concern of what that child encounters on a daily basis. So, yes, it's there, absolutely, but it's not on a bookshelf. Does that mean that if you looked hard enough, I don't know every book that's on that shelf. Tracy, I'm sure, doesn't know every book that's in the public library. Could you not find some books that have probably explicit verbiage? I would probably say absolutely you can. At what point, how is it being utilized? What student is reading it? Why are they reading it? Is it research material? I've always valued taking my kids to see and experience new countries. The Statue of David, the first time I took my daughter to see that in Florence, she was about 13. I had to explain, why he's naked. So there's just a large educational component that sometimes has explicit and graphic verbiage. I don't, you know, so.
And to follow up on that, so I think I know which two books Secretary Gray is referring to. It's easy to take particularly graphic novels out of context. Graphic novels tell stories with images and also some text as well. When you take individual pages and you say that this book, this image, this 1 or 2 pages out of context represents the entire book, you are not evaluating the book as a whole. And that's something that we have to remember, is that when we look at books, look at library materials, look at pornography, honestly, you're looking at the material as a whole. Thinking about Maya Kabe's Genderqueer, that book, quite a few pages were taken and posted on a news site, and it's only the images that show graphic representations of parts that we usually have covered by clothes. So to take those out and say, yes, this is pornography because of this small portion of the pages in that book, this very small portion of the story in general, reduces that author's, it's an autobiography, reduces that author's story, their lived experience, yes, reduces their lived experience to that tiny percentage of that story itself.
Also, I'd like to add to that too, that I had simply an old book, children's side, picture book, titled Babies. And it's a wonderful little picture book of real live babies, and they're laughing, and they're giggling. Sure enough, you come across that one page with a little penis, and there it is. You know, what do? There it is, right there. I actually just put a little blanket over it. You know, I mean, just, so if you could lift it if you wanted. Yeah. But there you go. But I bet the book was written in 1974.
Use a piece of duct tape.
Yeah, no, it's a little blanket.
I was wondering, is there a, sorry.
Very quick comment. I was teaching at Central Army College 5 years ago for 7 years. And I was teaching an intro to college studies. These are all freshmen coming out, namely District 25 and maybe score. And but a student asked me if I had ever read the book 50 Shades of Grey. And I says, no, I've heard about it. And I then asked them, how many of you have read 50 Shades of Grey? And every one of them raised their hand, boys and girls. They're reading that in high school 10 years ago. The student gave me a copy to read before the semester was over. By page 127, I was bored. So I never finished it. But the point is that there are forms of what society may deem pornographic, but in a literary sense, I do not see that as pornographic. It's simply an expression of how people choose to live. And it's us as parents, and I'm glad to see that you're a parent also, I am too. We provide the guidance, academically speaking, for our children. But when we look at society as a whole, that guidance has become less and less, and children have to rely on their buddies to get that guidance, which is unfortunate. It's certainly a dark mark on society for parental responsibility. That's not to say that all parents are that way, but I believe with the mentality of the parents, most parents are giving it their best shot.
I agree.
Well, an interesting statement that I hear that is contradictory to some of these narratives is, I hear a lot, well, I don't co-parent with the government. Really? But you have people saying, well, that's too much of a responsibility for a parent to be engaged and find out what their student's reading. Or, I can't bother to talk to the librarian and find out what my student is reading. Oh, but I don't co-parent with the government. Well, really, it seems like, you want to say that, but you're shifting all these other responsibilities of parenting onto other individuals. We expect our teachers to parent. We expect our coaches to parent. We expect all these other people to parent, but I want to say that because, again, it elicits a response that generates a desired outcome.
And just to touch on academics, because we've kind of been focusing more on schools and publics, we have to remember that a lot of our students are in AP and IB classes. They are going to read tough materials. Thinking about To Kill a Mockingbird, they're going to talk about rape. They're going to talk about very tough discussions. And when we remove these, we're essentially saying, we don't want you to be successful as you go into college, as you are trying to learn more to then enter the workforce and provide back to the community. And that's something that's definitely, at least right now, colleges are dealing with a little bit of their own situation in academic libraries. But we have to remember that when we talk about protecting the children, a lot of these children are in college already. They are 17, 18, they're taking dual enrollment courses. If that's offered it's offered in my community anyways. But we have to make sure that our students, all of our students, are being set up for success as they enter adulthood. So it's always an interesting topic when people say we're protecting our children who have phones, who are able to read 50 Shades of Grey, who have already read 50 Shades of Grey and watched the movies. The child that most people envision when they hear we're protecting our children is a 5 to 8 year old. It's not a 17-year-old who's already driving around, who's going from high school to college to take a college course, who's getting ready to take their AP exam here in the spring. That's the wide range of children that we're talking about when we talk about protecting our children. And those are those who are going to be affected when we start limiting books and access to books. One thing we say, you kind of said it, is you absolutely have a right to determine what your child reads. You do not have a right to make that decision for everyone else.
Well, sorry. Well, one thing I wanted to add to that is that last year we had 2 students that graduated with their associate's degree on the same day they graduated high school. So two graduates already had their associate's degree. Hot Springs County has one of the top educations in the state of Wyoming. I think out of 12 out of 15 or so categories, students rank in the top 10 in the state. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math is #1 in the state, 3rd highest ACT score. One criticism that we hear sometimes is, well, you're just worried about a score. And what I always try to stress to people is behind one student equates to about 2 percentage points in our district. So behind every data point, there's a face, there's a child that is opening doors. So about 50%, I think 46% of our students are economically disadvantaged and qualify for free and reduced lunch. I've heard people say, "What? It's not our job. I don't co-parent with the government, right? So it's not the school's job to feed kids. But how do we expect kids to learn if they're hungry and if they're already starting, below where other students are?" And sometimes that comes from people who are some of the top earners in our county too. Why are we feeding kids? But what I like to think about is what opportunity would we have to change the face of our community if every child is getting a top-notch education, and we can maybe, in a generation, could we go from 46% free and reduced lunch to maybe 15%? What opportunities are we missing by giving our kids? And I think the best way we need to look at it is, can we get caught up on these other narratives? Absolutely. But if we can stay focused on really what is important, it will change the face of our community.
Well, I was just wondering, is there a statewide process on addressing challenges to books in public libraries, or does each library do their own thing?
Every library does, every county system does, so 23 different processes across the state. The Library Association fully supports local control, and that's one way that it happens. We do not get involved and try to tell Tracy what to do, what policy she needs to have in place. We'll support her and provide information if she asks for it. But ultimately, policies are shaped around what works best for that community. So there's no opportunity for one person to say, I want this book removed from the entire state. Some county systems even say you have to live in the county. Some say you have to have a library card with us. It just kind of, it varies across all 23 counties. And that's what we like to see, is make sure that we're not, that each county system is representing their community's best. Yeah. Same with the school districts. Yeah.
How many libraries are actually in the schools? Because I have heard we have one, and that's middle school. There's none in the grade school and there's none in the high school. That's the most common thing I hear.
You're asking for here, so every building has one, every building has a librarian. So the RWE has a library, the middle school has a library, and the high school has a library. And so I love that question because, we talk about having questions and not getting truthful answers. If somebody has that question, please give them my number. Have them call the school secretary and say, can I come and see the library? That's all it takes to get real answers, is go to the school. I've told people numerous times, we don't have career or trades. Really? Come to the school, I'll go with you. Tom Kelly was here not long ago. And I called Tom before he was gonna come and talk about wokeism and some of the other things that are present in your school, is what the flyer said. So I called Tom. I said, Tom, meet me at the school. Will you meet me there before your talk at the community? He agreed to. He was called and asked not to meet with me because I was going to try to persuade him. And I took Tom to the school building. And because I knew if Tom doesn't go to that school, he can go to that meeting and he can say, I promise you that it's present here. And I said, I'm not going to give somebody that opportunity. We're going to go through, and we're going to go through the school. Now, was it a risk? Absolutely, because I don't know what high school students are going to do. Somebody could have come down the hall. I'm not sure. Superintendent Hunt was, exactly. I think Mr. Hunt was questioning my decision-making when I called him and said, hey, this is what I want to do. But when he went to the meeting, he said, I don't see any evidence of that going on here. He saw kids in the social studies class challenging each other in their dialogue, and they had kind of a debate. And he really thought that was great. I appreciated seeing that. But if we have people who will say those things and refuse to go into the buildings and actually see what's going on, then that just perpetuates this narrative.
That is good to hear, though. That's not the case across all of Wyoming. So to have that in Hot Springs is great.
Okay, I have one more question. Why is it important to read and learn a variety of diverse opinions, even those that make us uncomfortable?
I feel I've spoken a lot, so if somebody
I feel like I'm right there.
you want to end?
Why is it necessary? Why is it, I guess I don't understand the question. Why is it necessary to read a diverse?
Well, and that's what I'm looking for. When I was in high school and, in college, there was a lot of literature that I was required to read. And I came from a fairly homogenous background.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were a lot of books that I read, and in my opinion, and I'm asking you yours, but in my opinion, it's because those things exist in our world. And you don't know who your coworkers are going to be, and you don't know who your neighbors are going to be. And it is a good thing, in my opinion, to develop empathy, to develop understanding, to develop an appreciation for the idea that we are not all similar and homogeneous, and our diversity is what enriches us and makes us great. But I know that that is a question. Why should my child read this book that is different from the values that we hold? I don't know.
Well, so I'm going to go ahead and
I've been I'm
Oh,
gonna
sorry.
say this, I can't speak to that as far as, because I'm not in the field of education, I'm more in the field of pleasure reading. I will say, however, that in this, I think 7th or 8th grade, my son was required to read The Witch of Black Pond, right? It was a nightmare. I hated it. I read it with him. It was so difficult. I don't know why his teacher required that. But aren't there other lessons that can be taught through another piece of literature that isn't so difficult and hard to read? But I think that's what the challenge is. So, go ahead.
Well, so I think that there's something that is scary that happens, and it's called an echo chamber. And when people sit in their echo chamber and they only hear the ideas, the ideology, the decision-making process is exactly the same. Again, it's interesting because I see this coming from adults, more so than students. I'm amazed because anytime I really get feeling frustrated with the way and direction that society is going, I like to go into the school building because I leave there thinking, all right, maybe there's hope. Because I think that it has the ability to strengthen your value system, not diminish it. I'm going to be honest, I'm a registered Republican, and I'm a Christian, and so I took a history of world religion class one time in the University of Wyoming. My professor was very good because he would challenge me on my religious beliefs. I remember someone saying, I was talking about it in my family, and someone said, "Oh, well, you should not be messing around learning about other religions." And I said, "Really?" I said, I completely disagree. Because I think to understand what your belief system is, and to fully understand what your belief system is, you have to expose yourself to other belief systems. I remember once sitting at the top of our motel in Istanbul. We could see the ISFE and the Blue Mosque were right there. And our waiter said, and again, my daughter was about 14, and this waiter came up and he said, and knowing we're in a predominantly Islamic country, he said, "Are you Christian?" And for a moment, I hesitated because I wasn't sure really how I should answer that and how that would be received. But once I answered it, he talked about how all the different religions that are confined and in close proximity in the city of Istanbul. But so I think it's critical that not only that we expose ourselves to those, that we read things, that we watch things, that we travel places, because it solidifies what your belief system is. So I fully value that. Yeah.
I think that's a great answer, and I just want to tag something onto it. From the start of the public school system in the United States, the purpose, expressed purpose for schools, libraries are different, of course, was to educate citizens. And what you're talking about are the skills a citizen needs in a classroom where they're debating different ideas because they have them in front of them. They're learning the skills of a citizen.
Well, and I think in fact they said the key to a free society is an educated populace. So why are we terrified of an educated populace? It feels like that seems to be something that is perceived differently now, and I'm not exactly sure why. I hope that we don't see that change. But what worries me is that in a community that I love, there are people that have employment mobility. I've told my wife, we have it. If education declines here, we will move and take our kids to where they're going to get a good education. But not everybody has that mobility. And so that's why it is deeply concerning to me to see some of those challenges. These are challenges not on just literature. These are challenges on education as a whole.
And just briefly, so to that point as well, there was a town hall on Facebook Live this past Monday by a group of representatives. And one of the comments was that materials in libraries should not be countered to the majority party. And that is said, that's a large brush to paint to one political party. I know for a fact that not everyone on the right agrees with things that LGBTQ lifestyles are inappropriate and wrong. I know plenty of people who are Republicans themselves and identify within that community. And I think that's the part that when we have some of these voices that have these platforms, say 70% of Wyoming says no, therefore we don't want any of these books in library collections. That's not right. That is telling all of the people in one of the recent 2019 studies said 3.3% of Wyomingites personally identified as being in the LGBTQ community. So there are plenty out there who weren't comfortable personally identifying as being members of that community. So when we remove those books, we're removing the potential not only for people to have these open conversations and learn more about the lived experiences of whatever affiliation, whatever group they're a part of, but we're also telling those people, those members of the community, those communities that they don't deserve that inch at a time of shelf space. So I think that's what's really important, is making sure that people see themselves. Libraries are called mirrors, windows to the world, sliding glass doors, whatever metaphor you want to use. And libraries should make sure that people in their communities are reflected on those library shelves.
Speaking of echo chambers, and does the Wyoming Library Association have a pretty good idea of where Moms for Liberty lives in Wyoming, like chapters that are organized?
Yes. The most active chapters are currently in Laramie County and Natrona County. That is the chair of the Laramie County chapter is also on Superintendent Dagenfelder's cabinet for parental rights and eliminating political bias. And they're currently working on draft policies to submit to all of the school districts as examples of how to remove sexually explicit materials. So she's been actively involved there. And then as mentioned, one of the Natrona County School Board members is also active with Moms for Liberty and came and presented here. She's talked down at the legislature. Those who are the strongest, we're seeing them pop up a little bit more around Wyoming. They do update their website when they have chapters kind of start to form, so you can always keep an eye using their website to see if they're active in your communities. Well, for those watching online anyways, if they're active in those communities. But those are definitely the strongholds, is Natrona County and Laramie County, and have been really the driving factors on changing library policies to remove certain books from the library shelves.
It's interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when they were here and did their presentation, it seemed like they were coming here trying to start something that isn't really happening here, and thought they were very unfortunate.
But then a Facebook group all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Well, and there is a chapter, and they, and I agree, that was my frustration, is they're talking about Mary Schmidt, the school board member that has spoken at the education committee, has talked about how the state dictates the curriculum. The state sets standards, they do not set curriculum. So, and they certainly do not do that here, the teachers set curriculum. So that was one of my specific frustrations, is you have a school board member, she was a homeschool parent before being a school board member. You can search up, questions when they answered, when they ran for the form. I feel like you have to be a good student. I think she's been on the board maybe about a year. So I do get frustrated and admittedly, possibly defensive. I'll own that. But I don't want somebody coming from another county, coming to Hot Springs County, telling us how we need to do education here when I feel we're doing very, very well by the measurable metrics. one thing, I like data, because data is objective information, it's not subjective. So the data points to one direction, and somebody else is trying to take you in a different direction at the detriment of my kids, and I do take that personal. But it is interesting you talk about removing political bias, because there are some of that same group that absolutely want principals and superintendents to be elected positions. It's interesting in Las County, those positions, we wouldn't even have qualified applicants. We wouldn't have qualified candidates. Why would you want to run if you may not have that job again in 4 years? And then I caught a lot of flack because I refused to answer some questions that were sent to me by the budget committee that I felt were measuring compliance. They're not measuring knowledge of something. And I'll be 100% honest, if you want somebody who's going to be compliant, it's not going to be me. So remember that if you ever have an opportunity to vote for me again, I will not be compliant. I'm going to look for the information, the facts, and that's what I'm going to go with. But that group does want the leaders of our educational community to be elected, and they would be in servitude to a certain group.
I also, since that meeting happened, I talked to someone and watched it after the fact, wherever it was available on video, and she said the same thing to me, and she said that if this town starts going that direction, that they would have to move, for the benefit of their children, and that's unfortunate.
Well, it is. Now, what I will say, I don't want to say that would be an immediate response, because I will tell you, hands down, I believe in all of my being that Hot Springs County has the greatest teachers in the entire state of Wyoming. And staff. We have amazing teachers, and I feel very comfortable that my kids would get a great education. But there was a district in Idaho that a group had retained or had won the majority of the seats, immediately got rid of the administration. They had 22 teachers leave almost immediately. So that, if we were to see that kind of exodus, that would change things. But we have tremendous teachers.
Yeah, just very briefly, so that's something that the Library Association is also keeping an eye on. And yes, I do see. Public library, so commissioners are elected, county commissioners are elected. They appoint the library board hires the library director. Nationally, we have seen attempts to change that, where the library board are now elected positions as well. And then you really start getting into the politics of us versus them. It has been discussed at least once or twice by representatives here in Wyoming and other board members, so we're watching that to make sure that we maintain that library board appointment system so that we don't get into all of those us versus them